What exactly is North Korea's end game? This is another provocation. How far will they go?
Well, I think there's a number of factors motivating the North Koreans. First of all, Kim Jong-un is attempting to strengthen the country's military capabilities. Part of that is, of course, his desire to demonstrate to his people that he can keep the country safe. But it's also an attempt to really take one step forward in moving closer to the ability to link North Korea's nuclear capabilities with its delivery capabilities. In other words, an effective ballistic missile.
How far away are we from that?
Well, it's difficult to say, but I think the latest launch seems to suggest that they've moved probably a major step forward in terms of delivery capabilities. There's some suggestion that the payload on this particular launch was heavier than in December 12 when they launched before. Most, I think, analysts would say they're probably about a year or two away from being able to link their nuclear capabilities and their delivery capabilities. But that's still something of an educated guess.
John Fraher, what do you make of this? I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be China that loses patience because they're kind of the chosen allies for something to actually happen to stop Kim Jong-un.
I think that's right. I mean, I think what we've heard over the last 24 hours is a very sort of predictable round of sort of outrage and anger and irritation. Western capitals, we had the UN Security Council meeting yesterday. But really, you're right, the key to this is China, and specifically through the Chinese banking system. That's how you really make sanctions against a country like North Korea hurt. It's really not nearly as developed, obviously, as Iran ever was. But I think the China relationship is very important. Very interesting news, though, also yesterday about how the US or South Korea might accept the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system on from the US on South Korean soil. That could be a real game changer here. There are risks involved in it as well, but it's definitely something that we haven't seen before. And
Virginie, we started off actually the conversation talking about how central banks are doing too much and how worried you are about geopolitics. Again, as an investors, you know, when this happens, and we had something similar 5-6 weeks ago, how do you look at it, and what does it mean for your risk taking?
So I think two things. One, as a stock picker, you must pay attention to macro and geopolitics in any case, because it will have an impact even on time where you can pick stocks when you have volatility like this. I think specifically with regards to this event, it's putting back on the stage the fact that China's relationship with North Korea has changed with the two new leaders. I also think that what's important to remember is that the end goal that China wants is the same as the one that the US wants. It's just the way you get there that's quite different. And of course, if the US is talking about deploying a shield, and with all the issues we have in the South China Sea, that is going one step too far for China. So although it really wants those nuclear tests to stop, it doesn't have the same means as before. And this drastic action, I think, is probably going to be very difficult to accept for China.
John Nilsson-Wright, how close are we to superpower confrontation in 2016? I know it's a very loaded question, but the BBC did a documentary called World War III.
Definitely not World War III. One shouldn't underestimate the gravity of this situation. I think the concern is that the international community has very little that it can actually do to try and restrict the North Koreans' efforts. Political statements, as we've seen coming out of the Security Council, denunciations by individual countries, the prospect of ever tighter economic sanctions is a good way of expressing the concern of the international community. But it's not very effective as a means of delaying this progress in North Korea's military capabilities. China's position is that it wants to avoid those economic sanctions because it fears the risk of a possible implosion of the political leadership on the peninsula and a vacuum that would emerge in North Korea if that were to occur. And therefore, the Chinese position has been to say that the Americans need to sit down with the North Koreans to negotiate. Now, that's, of course, in an election year, quite unrealistic. No American politician, whether Democrat or Republican, would begin to sanction or consider that particular option. And of course, it's what the North Koreans would like to see. They want the recognition that talks with the Americans would provide. I think what we're going to see is more economic pressure, and we're going to continue to see North Korea over the next months and perhaps the next year continue to test. At some point, we will reach a critical tipping point where the North does, in fact, have the capability to deploy a nuclear warhead on a missile. And that's a real game changer. But we're about a year or two, certainly, away from that development at this stage.
All right, John, thank you so much. John Nilsson-Wright, Virginie Maisonneuve, and John Fraher.